Okay, it's it's really exciting to be together again. It's amazing the stuff that comes up. We're going to pick up on page 180, and we're really going to try to make up for some lost time. I do apologize for last week. There was a misunderstanding. Moshe was away, I was away, but we're going to try to cover it today. On my trip, and before I ask Dr. Rosner a question, I know what his reaction will be. I don't know what his answer will be. I was on the plane with Professor Yonatan Levy, the Director General of Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, in the lounge. So I went over to him and I said to him, I want to thank you for something you said. He's very close to Rabbi Weiss, and he was on a panel together in January. We were together with a panel of doctors, Dr. Schlesinger and others. And he said, we know a lot in medicine today, but more than we know, we don't know. And that's the way I feel with our medical and dental halacha. The more I travel and journey this exciting arena, which is really, you could plug in and change dental for something else. We're very grateful that Dr. Rosner is back with us. We would like to wish Dr. Rosner a Fuhr Shlema. Moshe Rosenstein is back with us. You were missed. A question that came up, you'll forgive me, but a question that came up on the flight or after the flight, the combination was, and bear with me, a fellow had an infection in his wisdom tooth, a very bad infection. And he had it treated before he came back and had the tooth removed. And as he was about to board the plane, he was detained by customs, as it turned out, for no great reason. But he was placed in jail for 4 hours in Newark Airport. And on Shabbos HaGadol, we were in shul, and he said, well, I need to bench Gomel for my traveling abroad. Do I need to bench Gomel for my wisdom tooth infection? And before you laugh, you would do well to look up Shulchan Aruch Siman Ratio Test 219 in Shulchan Aruch. Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Rosner. Very rare that the Shulchan Aruch brings a notricon, brings a mnemonic. He says, V'chol ha'chaim educha sela. 4 have to be grateful to Hashem and give thanks. Birkas HaGomel. Chaim is Chovush. He was in jail. Yud.
No, the Yud is Yisur.
Yud is Yisur, which is the Chola. And the second Yud is the Yam, if you transverse the sea. And the Mem is the Midbar. So he said, I need to bench Gomel. He holds like those who do make a Gomel, a blessing of thanks after crossing the sea. He wasn't sure if he needs to make one also for the recovery from his wisdom tooth infection. And the Mechaber and the Ramah both give the answer, and I won't give it here. I'll leave that for you. And at this point, I would also like to welcome all of those, and we thank Dr. Glassman again, who now reports, our statistician, doctor, recorder, that we've reached over 1,000 viewers, which is very exciting for us. We ask you, please, if you have any input or insights, and certainly a question that I'm posing now, including this one, if Rabbi Dr. David Katz not only can consider entering it into the new edition, which is imminent, and the Hebrew one, which is imminent with God's help. You may have some numbers already. I gave you gmsdental@gmail.com. There are others. This is the one that comes to mind, gmsdental@gmail. We'd be happy to share it with the others. And the third one was that he got out of jail. And the question he had was, his conclusion was that he had to make 3, and that part we'll give away. And this really pertains to us. I don't think it's in Kesser Dovid, and it really should be. The Mechaber, there's a opinion that probably not only a Makkah Shal Cholol do you need to bench Gomel, make the blessing of thanks, but for all holy. The Ramah says, for sure, if it's a Makkah Shal Cholol, this is the opinion of the Ravid. So according to this, he needs to make 3, and he asked us, he needs to make 3 brachas. on each one, or does he make one blessing for all three? And the Mishnah Berurah actually asks the question, or at least gives the answer. And I think if one would look closely into the poskim, well, on one hand you could say, "Ein osim mitzvahs chavilos chavilos." So thank God you gave me, if three kids are getting married, we don't make one wedding, we make three weddings. So if we have three different thanks, there will be an argument that we should make three different ones. Arguments could be made both ways. But there's a beautiful Eliyahu and others who bring the Rimigash, an insight, because he asks a different question. Does everyone who was in jail, which was part of his question, have to make the blessing, or only if it's in Yoni Nefesh, only if it's a life, he was there for a life sentence, for a death penalty, or no, even for monetary or other reasons? And the Rimigash gives a beautiful insight into why one who is in jail for any reason needs to make the bracha. And when one understands that, one will, I think, understand the Mishnah Berurah that all three are really one blessing, all for the same reason. But we're going to leave that because that's not our topic. We'll leave you with a little bit of homework. I'd like to just review.
One of the Yuds is Yosser is a prisoner. One of the Yuds is a prisoner.
I think that Kesser is brought down as Chobush, is the prisoner. Yud is the Yisurim, is the Machla, but we can read it any way we like. Could be. We have to look at it.
I always learned the Ches is the Chola.
It could be, but
the two Yuds is the Yam and the prison.
Okay. We all agree on the four. Sometimes we have, for example, it says in the Gemara, Pesach Mizmor LeDovid, LeDovid Mizmor. So sometimes we sing to be happy, and sometimes we're happy, so we sing. And the Zohar brings the same thing. It brings both psukim and learns the exact opposite from the Gemara. The conclusion is the same. Sometimes we need to sing to become happy, and sometimes we're happy we sing. Which pasuk is which is argued. Here too, the four are agreed upon, but that's not our topic. We'll leave it for now. We have a very interesting question at the opening. You can catch it on the YouTube. We'll come back to it. But
quickly what it was? Or?
Yeah, quickly. A guy had an impacted wisdom tooth and came from America, and customs put him in jail for 4 hours on Wednesday, Thursday. And he wanted to know, does he have to bench gomel? Does he have to make the blessing of thanks for the wisdom tooth? Does he have to make it for the trip? Does he have to make it for getting out of jail? And does he have to make 3 blessings or 1? And there's a beautiful Mishnah Berurah in Reish Yud Tes in Siman 219. And the answer is there if you look closely at the Eliyahu Rabbah and others in the name of the Rimigash. We'll leave that for now. What I really want to bring is what Professor Yonatan Levy said to me. We know a lot, but more than we know, we don't know. And as I travel through halacha, this is the point I'm trying to bring as we get to our topic, which is Pesach. Today, for example, a big Rosh Hashiva came to me. I mean, a big Rosh Hashiva. And he wanted to know what the IRM, the intermediate restoration, the temporary restoration, was made out of. I saw he was asking already about Pesach. And my question to the tzibur again is, what difference does it make if it's IRM, or a metal filling, or an amalgam, a silver, or a gold, or porcelain, or plastic? L'chorah, our questions are the same, and we'll review some of them right now, some of the issues. We'll introduce a couple of new issues, and then we will try to address the responsa and try to walk away with something, how we do it. I basically tried to say, I'm not opposing, but I didn't see that it made much of a difference. All of these materials are definitely bolea, in principle. And we'll address that in a second. Before I get to the question, Dr. Rosner, which is, forgive me, Dr. Rosner, for asking this question. It was a combination, loaded question. But it is brought down. Is one allowed to smoke cigarettes on Pesach? Does he have to be concerned about chametz? Would you like to share your feelings?
Like they once asked the Rav, are you allowed to listen to music in the Sphere? And his answer was, na ganz Jahr making a year. So,
we'll translate. The whole year you're allowed to listen to music?
Same thing with the smoking, you know. You're not allowed to smoke a ganz Jahr, so why should you smoke on Pesach?
I understand you are the one who wrote the famous question to Ramosha Feinstein on this issue, right. And you hold that copy of Ramosha's response.
Right. For 50 years I had a running argument with Ramosha, and Moshe Tendler, who I'm very close with, told me that if Moshe were alive today, he would ask to smoke. Yeah. Knowing what we know now of the sakonas, not just lung cancer, but other head and neck cancers and respiratory problems.
I was once with Rabbi Rakefet.
My brother died of kidney cancer. Yeah, he was a smoker.
I remember once speaking with Rabbi Rakefet, Rabbi Rakefet. So he showed me a tshuva. I don't think it was in the Igros Moshe, of somebody who was in a jail cell. We talked about jail today. And he asked Rabbi Moshe, the food they bring me is chametz, so till it comes to my cell, I own the chametz. And I remember Rabbi Moshe's reaction. Oh, it is in the Igros Moshe. So he says, this guy, I don't know, he murdered, and what didn't he do? But he's worried that he should eat chametz on Pesach. Of course, he said he don't own it, but it doesn't. Yisrael alpha pishachot Yisraelu, and if a person smokes cigarettes, it may be an issue deraisa. There's still an issue that's brought up, but thank you. We know your feelings, and we certainly share your feelings. And it's one of those mysteries of our time. How in the morning I see some people rise and shine with a cigarette and coffee before davening.
I was in the public health service in 1963 to 65 when the first Surgeon General's report came out on smoking, the very first one. Since then, they've come up with one every year, update, new information on the dangers of smoking.
Yeah, sometimes we know that
primary smoking and then secondary smoking. I was even talking about tertiary smoking.
Well, we know the power of politics and money in.
Moshe says if somebody smokes in a mismedlish and it bothers somebody, he's a mazik. It's a mazik.
Okay, let's head back to our issue. I just want to bring up a couple of the points we brought up, and add a couple of new ones. Number one, the first question is.
Tooth infection. All right. You got a wisdom tooth.
Yeah, no, that we're leaving for now. We're going back now to Pesach. As Pesach approaches us, do we have to be concerned about koshering? Do we have to take our head and dunk it into the big pots that are on the corner? They are boiling water, so that we should become kosher for Pesach. The Chofetz Chaim would say we have what to work on in the mouth before we get to this level of problem. But why not? If not, and if yes, what? So let me just review slowly. Number one is, do we bring it often here, and my own brother said this, who was a dentist, we don't put yatsa lettuce in the mouth. You can't put, by definition, something burning into the mouth. One level of thinking. Two, even if we do put something hot in the mouth, is it a klisheni or klishlishi? Is it a secondary or a tertiary utensil, and therefore less of a problem? And thirdly, even if once in a while we do put something really hot, and we talked about a davar gush, a piece of kugel, and the Rabbi Shavais who said we don't need to be machmer on Pesach, that davar gush, that a solid is considered a primary utensil, still a big chiddush in general, a big novelty, is that we go by the most common, customary use. It's a big, you would think that you go by the most stringent. In other words, if you did the word, it's a fascinating.
That's halacha.
Okay, that's halacha. And this brings us back to the definition of scientific reality and halachic reality. Because halachic reality, scientific reality, is the cheeks absorb, and the tongue absorbs, and the teeth absorb. And halachic reality is that it is not, and why not? We also ask, is it analogous to knives cutting into something very sharp? In our teeth, and the incisors are certainly sharp, and we certainly do it with duchka, the sakina, we do it with power. If you don't believe me, try biting your tongue once, or take a 3-year-old child. Try to hold his jaw closed with 2 hands. You can't do it. The power is tremendous. So, does it have the halacha of cutting deeply and powerfully into the chrein that you have on Pesach night? We also brought up a big chiddush as well, and this is one of Rabbi Shavai's, which is the spoiling effect of saliva.
Well, some people do. Some people have chrein. They chew it.
Right. So there's Yotza Schor Befsedo. Here you're eating crane, which is not the ikr, is not the main maror, and it could be that you're chayzer v'ner, a bigger problem, which is the chametz that you had at 9 o'clock that morning. The spoiling effect of saliva and digestive enzymes on the food will add maybe also opinions that sharp food as part of another dish. There's secondary sharp food. We'll look at that today a little bit more. If you have these sharp foods as part of a tafshil of a dish, maybe it does not have this chumrah. And another one is whether restorations are part of the body and thus should not be treated differently from the rest of the natural dentition. Even though we may feel the natural dentition absorbs, and almost certainly does, and even if you tell me that the glazed enamel doesn't, most people have unglazed.
It becomes an integral part of the body. It's like
And
if you
so-
get if you get a kidney transplant,
Wonderful,
you know, that
and
kidney
so-
is now part of your body. It's
And
yours.
so why? So maybe there are measures I have to take 24 hours before for my body also. Where do we find such happiness? So let's try to look inside and get as far as we can. On page 180.
Someone asked me today the flip side. How come when you cut yourself with a knife, you don't have to kasher the knife afterwards?
It's a very good
So I said,
question.
I'll ask you one better. How come when you touch a pot from the outside, you don't have to kasher the pot? Okay, so the Stipler deals with the Kilas Yaakov, right? The Stipler deals. He says a person is not usher anyway. A person don't need mechutz shtita, but a person doesn't usher with blios. There's no discipline. And okay, not for now.
Okay. We talked a lot about it.
It's an asana.
Yeah, it's not the Stipler.
The expert again. We mentioned the book of Rabbi Amiel.
What about a live animal? There's a shadow of a cat that brushed against a pot, right? So if you'd have a dead cat that would fall into the pot, it would make a treif. Right? So how come a live animal brushing against the pot doesn't make
Hot
a treif?
pot, a boiling
Hot
pot.
Yeah.
Outside of the pot.
Outside of the pot, yeah. So no, it won't make a treif. So that was why. If a living thing makes bleeding, it's another shayla. Volume 2.
Good question.
Come in there.
After reviewing the halachic literature on the subject, it becomes apparent that two distinctly different approaches emerge. Rav Nissim Karelitz writes regarding metal fillings that one should not eat hot chametz for 24 hours prior. This is a very logical, practical approach with minimum discipline. Before we add all the other kulos,
You're going to mention artificial teeth for Pesach.
Yeah.
we were ready.
Right here, started over here.
We're sorry that you weren't with us for the general coverage of all these topics, which we did the past week or two. And now we're sort of recapping those, and we're going to get back to it. Yes, absolutely. But the question is there a difference, except for if there is a kula, if there is a leniency for natural teeth, does that apply for dentures as well? And if so, is it only permanent dentures, like bridges, porcelain bridges, implants, or
What about braces and everything?
or
else?
braces, and
Everything else
we
is-
keep on getting back to all of these. We need to walk away with something if we can. So for 24 hours, we shouldn't eat hot chametz. During this period, the chametz and the fillings are considered pogum or spoiled. They impart a flavor, okay, of if it's Eino Ben Yomo, if it's not that day, it's Nosin Tam Lev Gam, and that's his approach. As noted above, sharp foods with the pressure of knife causes this to re-emerge, even in the absence of heat.
And even more if it's puggle.
The pungent
Pungent
flavor
of the
of the
sharp
sharp
food
food also
restores
restores the good taste of the chametz even after 24 hours. So we have a problem now.
Which is true, right? Because people that's what used to eat. They used to eat very spicy food because it was
Right.
all spoiled. Right? The spices.
That's how they kept it.
That's exactly what Mamish about the idea.
There's some
is
foods that people often say the day later is always better.
Right.
Rav Karelitz holds that teeth do have the status of duchka, the sakina, the pressure of a knife, and therefore one should not chew horseradish.
With
Wow.
metal fillings. It doesn't say about the teeth. It's about the
Oh,
fillings.
well,
with normal
what-
teeth
okay,
without-
it's a good point, and it's
He's
not.
only talking about the
On
fillings.
one hand, with any type of fillings. On the other hand, white teeth, yes. And
Okay,
if there's a
but
special
he's definitely not talking about
the
teeth.
there is.
He's only talking about people with fillings. There's
Therefore,
no chumrah for
one should
normal
not
person.
chew red horseradish. If you're going to have maror, you should swallow ground radish. Even though there's a dion in the, are you yotz to the misamar if you didn't chew it, if you just swallowed it,
You take a slice, a piece
of,
of maror.
well, if you chew it, this is our problem. If you don't chew it, it's not called achilas maror. Swallowing is not called eating.
It's got to go through the base of the
He brings that, we won't get the details here, but he says the maror, you get the effect of the maror even without chewing it. Rav Moshe Sternbach also has the opinion that Hagala should be done on false teeth. And after doing that, or Bechlal,
He says
on the
if
teeth
Shabbos-
itself, he suggests that when Pesach falls out immediately after Shabbos,
Not like this year, like
not like
Motzei Shabbos,
almost
not
like
Motzei
this
Shabbos,
year,
right.
making it impossible to do Hagala before the time that chametz becomes forbidden. One should do it before Shabbos and refrain from eating hot chametz afterwards. So he doesn't really address the sakina. In a later response,
Here it is.
Rav Sternbuch writes, there are grounds to be machmir, to be strict in the matter of not eating dry garlic.
Isn't it dry? Just eating garlic, chewing on garlic.
He writes, not eat dry garlic. Look at what he says. And that it is wise for people with fillings to refrain from eating any sharp foods the entire Pesach. Can you imagine? Come into the kitchen and tell you I have no more pepper, no more lemon, no more onions, no more. You know, I always think of the Rabbi Yaakov Emden who wanted to, one of Rabbi Asher Weiss's classic shurim is the Rabbi Yaakov Emden as his father, the Chacham Tzvi who wanted to be mater, who wanted to, I say mater, to permit eating kitnios. Interesting. Rabbi Asher Weiss said theoretically a person with celiac is allowed to eat kitnios. Well, they said, Lamaisa, today there's no shortage of what to eat. But I think Rabbi Yaakov Emden said that it might be pikuach nefesh. What are you going to eat if you don't eat kitnias? I think maybe he held like the Chayot, the potatoes were kitnias. But we who don't know, because the potatoes are kitnias, what are you going to eat? If you take away the eggs and you take away the potatoes, there's not much left, and now you want to take away all of the spices. These poskas specifically mention garlic and maror, but their recommendation will apply to radishes, onions, scallions, leeks, pickled vegetables, cucumbers, pickled cucumbers, olives, sauerkraut, strong vinegars. Not a simple approach. The concern of these two, Rav Sternbuch and Rav Karelitz, fillings, crowns, dentures, and dental appliances are treated as utensils that absorb taste. A question is always asked, if you can't use a utensil to do borer, right? If you can't use a utensil to do tochen, how could you chew your food if you have a prosthesis? Another question for thought. The Eglital goes the other way completely. He says when you eat a watermelon, don't quote me right now without looking, with a fork and a knife, it's just like doing it in your mouth. That's part of the eating process. And just like you're allowed to pick the watermelon from the pits in your mouth, you can pick it with a fork and knife as you're eating it. But again, let's look at it from both directions, from very lenient to very stringent.
I'm just saying, on Hilchos Shabbos, the whole thing is like whether it's derech achila or not. In other words, it's nothing to do with mouth or not mouth, or teeth or not teeth, or real prosthetics. Okay. Chazal said that when you do a selection or grinding, like you said, in the process of eating, that's not called borer, that's not called tochin. That would have no bearing on blios in the mouth. You know what I'm saying? I would have to agree with you.
I would agree with you, but the common denominator is, would we consider the prosthesis as a kli? What's the difference if
it would be a kli, but a kli that is used derech achila like this would not be the kli that they asked. You know what I mean?
Well, one of the issues here would be, again, in trying to call it a knife, it could be you can't call your teeth a knife, but he would.
But taste, the transfer of taste is more based on, like, even though it's not scientific, but the way that Chazal and the way the halacha treats it, there's like a mechanics to it. There's a mechanism that you're asking a good kasha. How come it doesn't apply to regular teeth? Right. But we understand it certainly doesn't apply to regular teeth. But these already are kalim in the mouth. They're metal pieces in the mouth. Why? I mean,
well, we're going to see that. That can be argued both ways.
Okay,
in any case, this is one of their issues. Absolutely,
mechanism problem.
But they hold that teeth have the halachic status.
I'm sorry,
that includes implants too.
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah, any prosthetic, anything in the mouth that's made of anything that's.
And he says that teeth have the halachic status. So forget about the prosthesis. Teeth themselves have the halachic status of knives, capable of duchta, the sakina, of firmly, rigidly pressuring sharp foods.
No, that's true. But that's not like, that's just the fact that a tooth. And the tooth action is the same as a grinding kli. But
like you said.
I know, but he's only talking with respect to the prosthetics. In other words...
No, he doesn't even get that far. He's saying that you're not allowed to eat radishes, onions, maror on Pesach. It's a big chumrah.
Who, a regular person without...
Right,
No,
yes.
That's not what he's saying.
Yes. These postkos specifically mention, and they say position,
Only people with prosthetics. It's based on these two different things. You need both of these things to
Okay,
be in place.
he
One,
says, in fact,
if
he writes,
for whatever
it is
reason-
wise for people with fillings to refrain
Yeah,
from
it's
eating
only
any
talking
sharp
about-
foods in
without
the
fillings.
Pesach.
If you've got no
yeah, you got
fillings,
no fillings, nothing
then
in your
you
mouth, and
can
there's
eat
nothing
it.
at all. That's
Okay.
been for ages and ages.
We have
That's
to hold
never
on
been a
because
shaila.
it is and it isn't, because again, this would bring to question whether teeth have a different status because they're part of the body. We
Okay,
didn't
but
get there yet.
then the biggest kash in the world will be why Chazal never brought that up. Then there's nothing different about teeth, but
Okay,
fillings and these things which are relatively
First of all, you can
new,
see
so
over.
that's
You
a-
see poik chazir, you see that they did. Why, where, when? There's like you say, we never found an issue to do it. So there is clearly a difference between your own body and a utensil. So now we went in two different directions. Is the teeth considered a utensil? Oh no, teeth have a special status. You said that very well. Whether it's written or not written, we see that. That's the bottom line. Poik chazir madvar, go see what's going on. On the other extreme, we're asking a different question. Can we now say that a fixed prosthesis, or maybe even a removal prosthesis, once it is used as part of your body, for whatever reason, the Torah or Chazal permitted us to use our teeth, it would apply as well for them. It would be a tremendous chiddush. Let's go, because we have to try to move
But I'm saying
along.
so far nobody's brought that up. Just saying the idea that of teeth versus not.
We're
teeth
going to get
being
stuck in the Chumash,
Say
and the
that.
next chapter is on factors
let's
for
go.
leniency,
Okay,
and it's important to us to get to the factors for leniency, to know, certainly for a chol or whatever. In any case, based on these insights, they recommend avoid eating or drinking hot food 24 hours before. We went there. Refrain from eating garlic or sharp foods on Pesach. There are not too many people around who don't have fillings in their mouth.
No,
I had one
no,
today. It's very rare.
Lama lichayim, if you can't have that stuff.
Who said? Adam ki yomas bo'el. Regarding Mar on Passover, which right off the bat would say, hey, there's something wrong here. Well, like you say, when Chazal said eat Mar, and even enlisted Mar as one of them, if you were not allowed to chew it, they should have told us that. Okay, so we have a interesting there. I think I mentioned the last time, a tremendous chiddush, I don't know if you hear, Moshe, that I discussed with Bar Shavais, and I have celiac and I don't eat gluten. And Ramon Shapiro said that I'm not Yotze Matzah if I eat wheat, and Rabbi Shavai said, because he thought it's mamish dangerous, but medically it's not exactly that way. Rabbi Shavai said try to eat a kazayas, and other person said to eat 5 kazayas, and everything is wonderful. Is Rav Sternbuch writes that our sa'orim, our oats, is not oats of Chazal. Quaker's oats is not oats, and you're not yotes, and even though we have a machlokas, we've shown him, if you yotze matzah with oats, we paskin you do. But, says Rav Sternbuch, it's all very nice. Our oats is not oats. By definition, gluten is machmitz, and if it doesn't have gluten, it's not machmitz. Goes on. So, based on that, Rav Sternbuch, I took a more stringent approach, and I eat the wheat, and then Baruch Hashem, I survive. Some people are more sensitive. Rabbi Shavai points out very clearly, depends on your level of sensitivity. I bumped into Rav Sternbuch a few weeks ago, actually 3 months ago, and he had brought me a set of his chuvas. He said, "Did you read my chuvas?" I said, "I didn't read them all, but I read the one on oats. And because of you, I'm machmer, I don't eat oats." He goes, everybody argues on me, you could eat the oats. And for me, if you know Rav Sternbuch, you understand what a big chiddush that is. So here we see Rav Sternbuch in his full form. But let's go to the other way. Let's
What
try.
did Rabbi say that? Celiac is a shot I get a lot about. Rabbi who spoke halach l'maisa, and he said a person with celiac is allowed to eat.
Well, let's not
kidneys
do it.
if
Let's
they
not
eat
do
food.
it in one shot because it's not our thing. But the bottom line is, in principle, he told a celiac patient, at the present level, that there's no chumrah of kidneys for someone who's a chayla, and there's a chayla. Lamaisa, there's no shortage of what to eat. So he said, if we were in a place where there was nothing to eat, it's one thing. But he said, I don't think the person listened to my advice. But he's saying, in principle, if you have a level of celiac and you're in your Pesach, you say, a life is not a life. Got to remind me your name. Menachem. If you take it away from me, my life is not a life. Says the Sfas said the Klozim Rebbe, the Rosh Hashanah Rebbe, of course you're allowed to eat treif in the concentration camps. But if I have to eat treif, he said, my life is not a life.
Wow.
I will never be able to live by myself. It's mutter to give up his life. He said, B'chai b'hem, that would be categorized. So a person says, if I can't eat my kidneys, now if a person says, I can't have my cigarette and coffee in the morning for davening, I'm not sure that fits into that. But we'll leave that for the poskim. In any case, let's move on because Rav Shlomo Zalman takes a little bit different approach. Rav Shlomo Zalman cites some sulfur and a son sulfur, and this is one of Rosh Hashanah's big babies, is pogrom. When food, this for me was a big chiddush when I first heard it, a really novel And I think this is one of the cornerstones. I used to think the cornerstone was that we can't have yatsu lettuce in the mouth. And you add to that the novelty that we usually don't put yatsu lettuce in the mouth. But here we have something even bigger. It doesn't matter, right? It depends if you're Polish or not. So if you're Polish, our grandfathers, well, not Polish, but the similar, they would. If the chicken soup wasn't boiling and the smoke didn't come out of theirs, they pushed it away like that. But it's not what we eat 24/7. We have Friday night, a few spoonfuls of that. But let's get into our chiddush now. Tonight we're trying to move along. Is that once the food is exposed to saliva, natural body heat, chemical digestive reactions of the oral cavity, this causes the particles to lose their status as food. This is the cornerstone. This is Reb Shlomo Zalman. This is Reb Asher Weiss. We'll see later a chumrah that Reb Shlomo Zalman brings that I'm noeg for years. I was very happy to see that he brought the same thing. Hopefully we'll get to it. And would negate the need for any kashering. We could close the books and we can basically go home. Going to Reb Shlomo Zalman. It's rendered spoiled to such a degree that sharp foods, which ordinarily have the potential to stay safe 24 hours, would not have an effect. Tremendous chiddush. Wow. You can now, Menachem, you can sleep knowing that you don't have to eat all the tomorrow before Pesach. Rav Auerbach cites the Prima Godim in Hilchos Taroivis that it's possible the laws of Mechalia L'Shevcha applying only to Pogrom of Ben Yomo. That is not so spoiled as the laws instead of food out with humus. The bottom line is, Reb Shlomo Zalman says, it is not called food. This goes for our eating milk and meat during the day within 24 hours.
But just explain the svara. I'm saying the svara he's saying it's a very chashuv svara. Yeah. Because it's not just in the mouth. He's saying like this, that whole halacha that an onion or a garlic or something sharp, even like according to the machmirim, a pickle, but according to an onion or a garlic, that it can turn old taste into fresh taste. That's only taste that's pogum because of being 24 hours. But if you've got taste that's pogum because it was washed, like Rav Moshe says, in a dishwasher with soap, and he says that makes all the taste pogum.
It'll be the same.
No, it won't. It will not wake it up.
It'll
be the same.
Right.
It'll remain not exactly. So I'm saying that's a very big chiddush.
So
he applies that chiddush to the mouth.
How long does it?
People not saying it in the mouth. He's saying that chiddush that a davar charif only wakes up a 24-hour-old tam pogum. We're going to apply that chiddush and say that this taste that's pogum in the mouth is not pogum from 24 hours, it's pogum from enzymes, and therefore even a davar charif will not wake it up. I just want to say that that's the svara. That's very interesting. You know what I'm saying? It's okay. Say that.
So how long does it take for food to become that spoiled? What's the level? My suitcase that I sent on Wednesday with the meat for my wife is still sitting in Newark. So 4 days it's sitting in the suitcase. When does that meat become spoiled enough that it shouldn't be considered food? And a thought came to mind as I read the bulletin board. When I sell my hummus this year, I might have to sell it in my house, in my home, in my office, and in my suitcases. B'chol makom shu. And I don't know where it is. I hope to God I'll get it. I spoke to Ahmad about an hour ago in Newark, and he says he's taking care of it, so I'm going to have peace of mind. But in the meantime, my wife came to the conclusion you don't need to bring meat from America. We have more than enough meat in Eretz Yisrael, and I agree. In any case, the Rambam says it takes 6 hours. And that's why our minhag, let the Yekas, everyone the Dutch, everyone is there, our minhag is 6 hours, because it takes 6 hours, and this would seem to support Rav Auerbach's position. Let's move along. Rav Auerbach mentions several other factors for leniency. He says sharp foods which can cause spoiled flavor to return are not every sharp food. Maybe he says chilsis, radish, but not every sharp food. Also, he cites that many opinions limit their...
That's a machlokas already in the Shulchan Aruch. It's saying even though
so
we're
here, right. So we're machmir, like we said, also by
garlic and onions.
Here you don't have to be machmir.
Exactly, right.
Opinions that limit Ramah's stringent position that hot, solid foods will impart, and this is what I brought before, flavor and cliché. In other words, we are machmir that a piece of hot kugel that you bite into is considered kli rishon. On Pesach, you don't have to be machmir. It's interesting because usually on Pesach we're more machmir, and I heard Rabbi Ashavai said this, is to cliché the cases where kashering with a gola is possible. Okay, in other words, the only time you need to be machmir stringent on gush kli rishon is when you have an alternative.
Klisheni.
Right.
Klisheni.
No, klisheni.
No, they're very clear. A
Return to
davar gush,
Gusha.
that a davar gush. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, fine.
Klisheni should be
A
considered
davar
Kli
gush
Rishon.
in a klisheni remains a kli rishon. I'm sorry. Correct. Right.
Exactly.
Okay. No, and I tell you because I just spoke with the Rav about this. I was this week. A China comes up a lot about old China that people get from old family members and different things. I don't want to say halach and ma'aseh for everybody who's watching the shiur, but the Rav said there's definitely. See, the Rav said there's the one seer of Yud Beis Chodesh, the Chacham Tzvi, even though we're not somech on that all the time, but he said that. He said together with the fact that a davar gush is also a chumrah and on a klisheni.
Exactly. So now it's time to pile up the leniency.
Yeah, exactly.
But here comes Menachem. This was written for you. The next line was written for Menachem. If it wouldn't be written, I wouldn't be able to cite it. It is also his opinion. And if you knew Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, like we said, Rabbi Shlomo Bar, I had to know his personality. You know, at Rebbe, you say, who are you, Omer? You have to know who the who was. The Tolna Rebbe is a big expert. Before he quotes a Tana, he gives you the background. And it tells you where he's coming from. You know, from Yehuda speaking, you know, you talk about somebody who said, stay in Bavel, we belong in Bavel, wait for Mashiach. And if Rabbi Zera spoke, you know, you're talking about somebody who had such a tremendous office in Israel, says, Rebbe, I love you, but I avoid speaking to you because I know your position. And when you're around, I turn, Torah I learn from you. But when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, I don't agree with you. The end of Ksubas and other Gemaras. So you need to know who's saying it. Rav Shlomo Zalman says as follows. It is also his opinion that if we forbid a person from eating hot and spicy foods for Pesach, it will detract from his joy of the holiday, and that this would have the status of great loss. So you got it. So you got two biggies already. As an added factor of leniency, he suggests, as an extreme measure of caution, to drink hot water before the onset of Pesach at the usual temperature that one drinks. I have suggested that you also rinse, forgive me for the viewers, but those who do endodontics, root canals, know that we traditionally took 4/5 water, 1/5 Clorox or bleach, and we use that, and it sounds crazy, but guess what? It's sterilized, healthy, and I would recommend all my patients with dentures once a week to put it into such a solution. And sure enough, if you see further here, I think he brings it here, the Rav Shlomo Zalman says to do such with kerosene. Although Chazon Ish never applied in writing, it is reported that Reb Chaim Greineman and Tesser of Auerbach that the great post accepted the reasoning as the correct halacha. So it's brought here that the Chazon that Rav Auerbach's position is agreed upon, unlike Rav Sternbach and Rav Kurl.
Who said drink with kerosene? That I didn't even hear.
I thought I saw it here, but I think it's brought later on.
I don't think so. I didn't think.
Yeah, I saw him say it inside.
Okay, so far I didn't see.
In those
that
days,
here,
you don't remember seeing. I do remember seeing it.
If
If not, I will apologize.
For
But
our viewers, what do we peskin? That you can? Just
that we can what?
we can have hot spicy
What
food.
Rav Asher Weiss holds, which is what he says in the tshuva, here he's just bringing out, he's explaining all of the rationales and the backgrounds, but the bottom line of Rav Asher Weiss, which is, let's say, what I would tell my students and what I would tell people, is like this. There's one, let's say there's the halacha ma'aseh that we hold, that after 6 hours, or after whatever time it is, the enzymes in the mouth render all the taste totally pugum, totally, and then you could chew hot things and you could eat everything. He does say, Rafais, that there's a makom to be machmir, meaning there's a makom for stringency, if you can do this, and it's not going to, ruin your day and put you in a bad mood and make you, snappy at your family, but there's a makom for leniency if you can refrain from having hot chametz for 24 hours.
As we left this shrine b'chipazon, we're going to do the next few pages b'chipazon as swiftly as we can for two reasons. One, not to let the Yetzer Hara get in, and two, to be in the spirit of Pesach, which approaches exponentially. It sort of accelerates. It comes by surprise. So let's come down the stretch. 185. Tzitz Eliezer, after a long review, writes that it would nonetheless be ideal to have a separate set for Pesach use. So we have also seen how Rabbi Shlomo Zalman describes his own personal method of Hagala. Now, that's what I mentioned with the kerosene. We probably skipped it over there, but somewhere I do recall him saying it.
He said hot liquid.
Well,
Here he said Shlomo Zalman said hot
could
liquid.
be, okay, maybe it's referring to that. We'll leave it for now because I can't find it. However, it is clear that there are well-founded reasons for leniency. One, we talked about pogrom. We won't go over that again. That the saliva, the enzymes in the oral cavity, after 6 hours, render it pogrom, and since we don't eat chametz within 6 hours of Pesach. Even if it is something sharp, we added to that even the sharp foods in a secondary dish, and even sharp foods was stringent on all this whole list of things in combination with the need. And Menachem Simchas Yom Tov is we have what we make of. We also talked that it is also an established fact that the overwhelming majority of foods placed in their mouth are not Yatzol Ledes Bowl. We go by roll, by the most common use. But let's go to something a little bit more, I think, down to earth and practical for us, which is Shulchan Aruch says if a vessel is used mostly as kli sheni, it can be kashered in a kli sheni. The Ramah, Ashkenazic custom, is to require Hagala purging the Kli Rishon for items that are absorbed via a Kli Rishon even once. So unlike, like we said, most common use, no. If you once used something for treif, it's treif. So if you once used it for meat, that's it. It's meat. It's not dairy. If we apply the stricter ruling of the Ramah to people with dental restorations and fillings, this would mean that they would be required to wait 24 hours between Yatzol Ledes Bowl meat and dairy foods, which we don't do. To be precise, even waiting after 24 hours would be ineffective since biting the sharp foods would reawaken all meat and dairy taste. And here we come to Pokhozi Menachem, where we didn't see not our fathers and our grandfathers. I'm not saying they weren't individuals, they were. Since this is not the custom, and modern day poskim have not ruled accordingly, we must assume, this is what we said, I don't know all the reasoning, we must assume that the oral dental setting is halakhically treated as a klisheni along the lines of the Shulchan Aruch. Another thing, this is our,
what you were saying before.
our personal question. Is it are natural teeth, is it like natural teeth, which is a part of the body? In the context of mikvah laws, it is treated by most poskim as a chatzitza. We're talking now about removable teeth. Similarly, just as it is accepted that natural teeth do not need koshering, fillings and crowns that are permanently placed to act as actual teeth. I think that's the word. To act as natural teeth, they should be treated as natural enamel. Rav Daniel Chanin asserts that a person's body is not treated as a utensil that absorbs and emits. He doesn't bring here a makar.
Do you know what that is?
Personal, I do not know. He is the Rosh Hashiva of Keter Torah and Mo'arav for Kashrus in the Beit Shemesh community, so you can contact him. And he refers you to the Rambam and Mishnah Torah in Macholos Asuros,
No, but it's very
chapter
interesting
2.
here, 'cause he
halacha
addresses
three.
this other issue here. He says, I'd like to see what his source is for this, but he says very interesting. He says that a person's body is not treated as a utensil in general, period. Just like our question before about cutting yourself
Right.
with a knife.
But he has
It
a
is-
little bit of a different feeling. He says that once the absorptions become part of a person, this is now considered a taste of the person. It is no longer chametz. In other words, it loses the status as food. I don't want to go back into too much. If achila is betamtem, if inherently there's something chemical in treif that's betamtem, how come you're allowed to get it intravenously? How come you could take it by suppository? There's no isser. The isser chametz is achilas chametz. Achilas ochel, of eating food that is chametz. This is not food. Just like food that a dog can't eat, this is no different. It loses its status as food. It no longer is classified as eating food on Pesach. Tremendous Kiddush. This is his thinking. Properly performed, the acrylic of dentures is far more porous and absorbent than the material used for crowns and fillings. So what? What is a numbers game? Okay. Properly performed, Eroi involves. Eroi is pouring boiling water into dentures, etc. The poskim themselves have acknowledged.
No, he's saying in terms of damage. I think he's
We're
just
getting to
explaining-
that.
No, he's
First
explaining what the
definition.
difference
First
is.
definition.
Right.
But thinking of doing such a thing, the poskim say, could distort the items and produce an altered fit, affecting proper function, which is the
It's
case.
very real.
There is also the consideration of possible financial loss, hefsid maruba, and therefore mitzarev. As far as sharp foods, we're really going to try to cover this. And Dr. Rosen, you'll stay with us an extra 5 minutes this week. The Shevet Levi points out, we do not rule strictly when the davar charif, when the sharp food is only part of a prepared dish. We also should rule accordingly to rov tashmisho. In other words, most foods in the dishes are not charif, are not sharp. Additionally, opinions hold that the law of davar charif of sharp food is limited to those few foods mentioned, as we mentioned before, the Reb Shlomo Zalman, as mentioned by Shlomo Zalman. Also, the saliva and enzymes we brought. It's no longer called food. I think there's a key phrase here. It is no longer, it's a big, I'm learning a lot here too, really. I'm learning a lot. The suggestion, I was never fully comfortable. I always tell my patients, it's a good thing I'm not a posek. I wouldn't let you eat on Pesach. Okay? And the reason is because I'm an Amoritz. I didn't know all these factors were not on my fingertips. Thank you, Rabbi Dr. David Katz. Thanks to you, we have more clarity today. The suggestion that chewing with teeth is halachically analogous to applying pressure with a knife is debatable. Also, come on, there goes on a knife.
No, also a grinder. Also any grinder. It's a maducha, it's a grinder. It's a mortar and a pestle. What's a tooth? It's a mortar and a pestle. What's mamish exactly the same motion? What's the
Shevet Levi in two different shuvos.
Okay,
in two different responses. So we do not impose a decree upon the community that the majority of Jews will not be able to uphold. Can you say that to cigarette smoking? Can you say, but if most people can't not talk during Kriyas Torah, you're allowed to talk? There's a limit to that too. So it's not a blanket free for all. But things that are debatable, things that have all types of leniencies, certainly. If they said you need to go to the mikveh, and they saw that people could not go to the mikveh every day or whenever necessarily, and they therefore did not uphold. Now the Shiltei Giborim and others say, very interesting by the way, Rabbeinu Yonah, Daf Yud Gimel, in Bracha says, they asked the Rambam, why didn't you write about immersing going to the mikveh every day? He says, I couldn't write it in my halachic work, but I myself never missed. Wow, a Rambam. Wow. In other words, Rambam. And Shulchan Aruch says, it's not that it's mutter, it's not, you need to go. But what can you do? Most people can't go. And the Rav Oshevai said today is a whole different setting, Don't quote me for sure on that, Rav Oshevai, that today it's right in your shul, right down there. You have to reawaken not everything that wasn't. Obviously, he's applying this idea only loosely in this context, meaning that you can't always say just because everyone does it means it's okay. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Shavai said, I asked him, can we use cottonseed oil? In Israel, the machrenatu. The Yishalm is a machrenatu. Give us 5 more minutes, Doc. Is a gzeir in Yerushalayim not to eat cottonseed oil? In America, they eat cottonseed oil. So I asked Rabbi Shavai, can you eat cottonseed oil? He said, the truth is you can, but there is so many alternatives why he feels strongly that kidneys should be held in place strong. Let's finish up. Rav Wosner's intent is to accentuate that one must take into account, this is classic, one must take into account the hardships of imposing a difficult measure on the public, especially when so many factors of halachic doubt and leniency are present. In this vein, Rabbi Yosef Carmel has opined that the Torah must indeed be one that people are able to fulfill, and one should be wary of halachic rulings which cannot be observed by the public at large. I just want to say quickly, when I first came to Israel, I asked Dan Rabbi Lazar Zecher Tzaddik V'Kodesh L'Vracha about this action, that action. There's so many aksherim. Could you tell me which ones I can eat and which not? He said it's too complicated. I can't go into them. But one thing I can tell you, if you can't eat by a friend because of the aksher, then it's not a kosher aksher. What kind of business is this? You want in your house. I heard on Pesach in Shalavim from the Dayan, what was his name, Shiloh Raphael. He asked Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he told me, I don't eat heter mechira, the shmita, the selling of shmita. I don't need to go brachs. I don't mix matzah and water. But my father does. What should I do? He told me, Kli Rishon, said to me,
You do what your father does.
He said, when you're in your father's house, it's mutal chatchila, you're allowed to do it without even a second thought. And when you're in your house, it's osher b'devi, you're not allowed to do it even if you're up against the wall. So you have to have a certain, this is Rav Shlomo Zalman. In this vein, Rav Yosef Carmel has opined that the Torah must indeed be one that people are able to fulfill, and one should be wary of halachic rulings which cannot be observed by the public at large. This principle is one of the foundation stones of halacha, and should be contemplated when rendering halachic decisions or recommendations. Rav Shlomo Zalman's opinion would detract from the joy of the holiday and have the status of great loss. Additionally, it's difficult to imagine observance of these halachic suggestions, though well-intentioned, may create discord at tables where these food dishes have previously been eaten, which have become family traditions. These practices may also be divisive, what I brought now, by creating additional manhagan that will splinter Klal Yisrael. Wow, Baruch Shekiven. That will splinter, and guess what? All of these things don't come to the pinky of splintering Klal Yisrael. We learned nothing else today. Even more than they are already. We need to think 100 times before. You want to do it in your own home, in your own Dalet Amish, on your own 4 cubits, it's one thing. Well, we have suggestions and recommendations. We don't really have time, but we will read just maybe one list on page 194. Most of our Pesach discussion focused on the dietary restrictions prior and during the holiday, as well as on kosher choices that take into account the risk of damage, financial loss, financial cost of new devices, the degree of inconvenience, acceptance, and personal austerity. In addition, we have mentioned the effect the practice might have on the harmony of a family and its traditions.
It's wonderful.
You can kiss the page.
Shkoyach,
And this
it's really
is
amazing.
Rabbi Weiss, this is Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, this was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and those of us who grew up in the lap, Rabbi Dovid Goldstein, Mekalacha, and other great poskim. Yeah, you could cite the Shiltei Giborim, and you could cite the people, and it's important too. But you also, Binu Shnost over there, you need to understand where we're holding. Where are we holding? And so I think we walked away with a very working
Very practical.
knowledge of the subject, which will allow us to go back afterwards and be enriched by the other shalos that come up. Thank you all.
I think one way of putting it is that the chai b'hem is not just life or death.
Okay. Up to a point, he says. Up to a point. You can't be mater asurim. You can't permit things that are usur, but you can use it and say, even though we're usually stringent on this or on that, in this case, you know what, it's splintering your family. You got your 12 kids over, this one wears a shtreimel, this one goes to America's Rav Kook, this one is a Lutvak, this one is a Chassid, this one is a Sephardi, one is Ashkenazi, and you're splitting them all up and the kids can't talk to each other.
Like kosher and
Good, thank you for coming. I'm glad that you're doing better.
First time
My brother is.
You took a copy, Doc? You took a copy?
Yeah.
Yes, kids.
Great.
Kids.